Well, that's a good stage setting if there ever was one. So this morning, we are extremely fortunate to have with us today someone who knows the value of the trading relationships to Canada's prosperity and the need for us to invest in the future to ensure those relationships are beneficial to Canada and Canadians. You've probably seen him already. I'm referring to my friend and colleague, the Honourable François-Philippe Champagne, Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry. Now, just a few words of background for our American and Mexican colleagues here today. François-Philippe Champagne was first elected in 2015 to represent the riding of Saint-Maurice-Champlain, following an international career in the private sector. He served as Minister of International Trade, Minister of Infrastructure, and Minister of Foreign Affairs, and in 2021 was appointed his current role, Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry, and that's where we've got to know him the best. He's an engaging and energizing Captain Canada for investment, and I'm really proud to call him a friend. We are so fortunate as Canadians to have such a passionate, articulate leader representing the manufacturing and exporting sector at the cabinet table, but also across the country and globally. C'est un grand plaisir à parler ensemble ce matin. Thank you for making time to be with us today. I'd like to invite you up and say a few remarks. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Which chair do I take? You got the number?
You get to choose.
I get to choose. Here we go.
Right. Make sure these are working, yes? Okay.
It should. Should.
Now, Minister and I have spoken before at events, and I thought it was pretty hopeful that my staff gave me 7 questions. I don't think we're going to go through all 7. Let's begin. First.
Well, can I just say hello to everyone?
You can.
Yeah, no.
You're the minister.
First of all, I just want to say, first of all, I hope I'm going to offer you a bit of champagne this morning. I thought it was a good way to start the day, a bit of champagne to start your morning. But I just want to say thank you first to Dennis. To Dennis for hosting the conference here in Canada. Thank you for your remark. Jay, honestly, a lot of thoughtful remarks about the state of the relationship. Alejandro, welcome to our Mexican friend. And obviously, Patrick, thank you for sharing that. But I think we should give a big round of applause to everyone who has joined us because, Dennis, you have been the voice of manufacturing in this country. You've been a leader for the whole industry. And I could not be more proud to be with you this morning. But I think on behalf of everyone here, I just want to give you a big round of applause for hosting everyone here in Ottawa today.
Well, thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to start with the question probably on everybody's mind here. Let's start with your reaction to the recent U.S. election of President Trump. How is our government preparing for the possibility of this administration and where it wants to go? And what has the government been doing since the election? Maybe a few words.
Well, that's the question probably on everyone's mind. And I was saying to Jay, I just came from the Toronto Electoral Commission in San Francisco, but I think things are going to change. I think if there's one thing we can take, I don't have a crystal ball, but if I look at, talking to different people in previous administration or even in the future administration, we can. It's fair to assume, Jay, that things are going to change. Now, from the Canadian side, and I think it's probably the same from our Mexican friends. By the way, I want to acknowledge Vince Badway is with us. I think Yasser Nafki is with us. And Minister Jasek is with us as well. I have 3 colleagues and maybe others from Parliament. So you're very popular, Dennis, because it's our caucus meeting this morning. And you even have colleagues in your conference. So you're very popular in town today. But I want to say that for us, we've been engaging. I was co-chair of what we call Canada-U.S. engagement. And I would say over many months, we have been engaging with the U.S. administration. And there's really 3 things that I think we should remember. And I come from a manufacturing background. I spent 20 years of my life in Europe. I was with ABB for many years. So I feel really that I'm one of yours in a way because my career before politics has been about building factories, making sure we employ people, and we deliver goods in markets across the world. And the 3 things that we've been always addressing with the U.S. administration, and I was Secretary of State for the Americans in the room, or Foreign Minister for those who are Canadians at the time of the part of the mandate of the previous President Trump I was there at the time with Secretary Pompeo. So the first thing is security. I think that when you talk to our American friends, and Jay, I'll look at your smile if I say things that you agree or not, but the first thing is about security. Security about the borders, in our case, security about the North, and security about the Arctic. That is the lens, I think, because today, I would say, colleagues, economic security is national security. When I started in my role as Minister of Industry, or as you would refer in the United States as Secretary of Commerce, my interaction were mainly with the Commerce Department. Today, my interaction are mainly with the National Security Council. That is to say how the relationship has changed. So the first thing I would say is security. The second one is supply chain resiliency. I think we all feel the aftermath of COVID still. And I would put it to you, Dennis, but global supply chain have become more regional. There's more emphasis on resiliency than pure efficiency, and therefore, you've seen a realignment of supply chain. And in the words of one American CEO that I met recently, he said, you know what I like about you, Minister? If things go wrong, I can truck stuff across the border. If they go really wrong, I'll put them behind my pickup truck, and I'll go get it myself. And that is to say how much the proximity of supply chain matters, and I would say certainly in the world where we are more integrated than ever, and we are more integrated in critical supply chain. And I'll give you a few examples. In one of my first meetings with the U.S. administration, I reminded my American friends that 80% of all the semiconductor manufactured in the United States are packaged and tested in Canada. That the only cobalt refinery in North America happens to be in Canada, so that we needed to work together in order to make sure we would have cobalt and other critical minerals. And then I went on energy and nuclear. So I would say the resiliency of supply chain is very key. And the last thing that I always bring to my American friends is a growth agenda. And I think this is the conference today. How do we grow that economic bloc? We are very fortunate. You know, I came from the G7, and when you compare the world, and I think Jay said that to Alejandro in their remark, but I would say stability, predictability in the rule of law is in high demand and short supply. And therefore, when you are an investor, when you're looking at you know, I would say investments that we have seen, just last year, Canada, you may recall, and I don't have the number, Alejandro, for Mexico, but in terms of foreign direct investment, the United States was first, Brazil was second, Canada was third. But if you look at that, it's about $60 billion of investment in just 1 year in manufacturing sectors. So for me, what I say is that the world is taking notice that this is an amazing trading bloc, and I think you have, and I think we are living the golden age of manufacturing. I would say the IRA has been great, I think, for all of us in the way that we have, I think there's kind of a rebirth of manufacturing and bringing back onshoring, friendshoring, however you want to call that. I think this is going to provide resiliency for decades to come, and that's what we need to protect together to make sure that these critical supply chain, whether you're talking semiconductors, whether you're talking about critical minerals, whether you're talking about energy, that we protect them and we enhance them, because I think that is going to provide prosperity. And if you look at the history of the world, countries which have invested in manufacturing, whether you're looking at Japan, whether you're looking at the South Korean miracle after the war, whether you're looking at Germany, countries that have sustained prosperity over decades have had a long and strong manufacturing base. So that's why I could not be more pleased to be with you this morning.
Well, thank you, and thank you for that perspective. Getting into some specifics, we know that in the past, President Trump has been quite transactional in nature. How will the government work with his administration on the issue of tariffs? You know, he's floated the idea of tariffs on everything that comes into the U.S. And it would be damaging, as you can imagine, to our sector. How do you guys plan to deal with that?
Well, you know, if I would say the difference in my view, and you know, you have a lot of experience in the room as well, but the difference in our relationship, in my view, is that we don't export to each other, we make things together. You know, before we had the breakfast, we were just in the room, the 3-4 of us, and I was saying, imagine 50% of everything that Canada exports to the United States comes from the United States. So in a way, just to say how much we are integrated, when you're looking, for example, about the automotive sector, and I know this is a great sector in all three countries. I know the number in Canada, but I would suspect it must be about the same in Mexico. A car would cross the border 5 to 7 times before it gets to a customer. So in a relationship where you're so integrated in your supply chain, more integrated than ever, I would say, that's the case we're making to our American friends in the ways that you may consider tariff on some in the world, but when you are with your closest trading partners, I'm not sure that this would serve the intended purpose in the way, because one CEO, and I wish I could quote him, but it was Chatham House rule, but one CEO is that you cannot undo what is natural. These supply chains have been built over more than a century. These supply chains exist today. They will exist tomorrow as they have been existing before. Because when you're looking at the supply chain, for most of you, the border is almost virtual. Most of the people that I know in the room in manufacturing have plants on both sides of the border. And it's true in steel. It's true in aluminum. It's true in forestry products. It's true in parts manufacturer for cars. It's true in about every sector of the economy. So therefore, what I'm always trying to think is, when you're looking at the agenda for North America, we have the chance, I think. I see the world in 4D. You know, for me, I don't see the world in 3D. I see the world in 4D, and the 4D is always around decarbonization, digitization of the economy, demography, and disruption. And I think when you look at the world in this way, you could say that the North American platform is in my view, at the renaissance and has the fundamentals to succeed. Why? Because I always say there's 5 things that really matters to people. First is talent. And I would say North America is still a big magnet for talent. And people want to come here. You meet people around the world, they want to come here. They want to live here. They want to build a family. They have a dream. The dream of North America is well and alive. The second thing, we have strong ecosystem, from car manufacturing to plane manufacturing to energy to the oil and gas sector to biomanufacturing to about every sector. We are a very solid ecosystem in about every key sector of the economy. The third thing, we have critical minerals. And I will say to you, in my view, I think critical minerals will play a key role in the 21st century. As much as oil has played a key role in the 20th century, those who have the critical minerals will succeed, because critical minerals are essential for the production of semiconductors. And if you agree that semiconductors is the DNA of progress, you need critical minerals. And they're also going to be essential for a number of goods if you believe that there's going to be electrification of transport. The fourth thing I would say is that we have energy. And energy is key. And I would say we even have an abundance of renewable energy. And the last thing is access to market. This is one of the most successful trading platforms in the world. And therefore, I think that when you look at talent, ecosystem, critical mineral, energy, and market access, I think you have the essence to build the economy of the 21st century. And that's why I'm so hopeful and positive, because you have built something which is going to be essential. And you know, few of us would, if you look at the state of the world today, I think that we're living in a world where there'll be more disruptions. And whether it's in conflicts in the Middle East or in Europe, whether it's tension in the Taiwan Strait, whether other parts of the world which will lead to other inflation and cost, I think we have the opportunity here to really build something extraordinary for the 21st century, because not only in terms of large manufacturing sectors, but I think in the digital economy of the world, we're leading the world when it comes to AI and quantum and cyber. And when you think about that, I think that this is going to make our business very, very competitive. I think it's going to address the productivity challenge, and I think it's going to bring prosperity for people on all sides of the border. So that's why, you know, when you look at the state of the world, I think living in North America is a good place to live.
Well, we certainly agree, everyone in this room. Some specific things that the government is doing. As we approach the review, can you provide us an update on the Team Canada efforts, and share how people in this room from all 3 countries, maybe we should be Team North America, can support those efforts? Because, you know, we've done it in the past, and it's you've begun again. Maybe give us some insights.
Well, it's a team sport. By the way, you're all welcome in the team, you know, as I call that. I mean, it's not about any one person. I think we all have vested interest. You have vested interest. I think your voice matter as much as anyone else. I would say probably more than anyone, because you know the integrated nature of the supply chain. You know the benefits of being able to trade across border. You know the benefit of being competitive when you have a way to access these markets as we have. And so I would say your voice really matters. I mean, the work we've been doing in Canada, I think is very similar to what you've been doing. And actually, your voice matters. I would say to our American friends in the room, because, you know, a lot of the discussion, Jay, is fair to say, are going to come from Washington in terms of the review. But I think there's never been a better time for you. And you know, what I've done was somehow I felt I was the connector in chief. My job was connecting the dots. And I was just saying, and I'll share with you, I'll put that in a book one day, but I'll give you a free chapter. I signed a confidentiality agreement with the editor, but I'll include you in the confidentiality agreement now because we're 300 okay. in the room.
All right. No royalties, though.
No. Well, we can talk about that after. Okay. Let's negotiate.
Okay.
But one thing that I remember once I was with one of the governor of a southern state, and it was a Monday morning, about like the same time. It's like 8 o'clock. And I could see the governor walking in and looking at me and say, why am I meeting this Canadian guy this morning? Really? And he looked at his scheduler, and I thought, this poor guy's going to be fired, honestly. You know, I could see the face, and I said, Governor, I hope you had a good day. He said, yeah. I said, by the way, I think I'm the most important person you're going to meet today. He looked at me, he said, really? I said, yeah. I said, you know, by the way, this great BMW plant you have. And then you get going and going. I said, by the way, your plant depends on the aluminum I produce in Saguenay, which is 20 minutes or about an hour away from where I live. You and I should be best friends. Within 2 seconds, he said, can I get your cell phone number? And now we became BFF, you know, best friend forever, because he's been texting me since then because he realized, he said, can we do trade mission together now? Can we, because I said, you know, my job is to just make sure you understand that. And there would be hundreds or thousands of examples that you could bring to the floor, and making sure that our leaders on all sides of the board understand this was just one issue. I could tell you, for example, about titanium. A number of colleagues would know that Rio Tinto invested recently, and I think we have folks of Pratt & Whitney and others in the aviation industry. Most of the titanium in North America today is not coming from a very friendly nation, I would say. We have invested or co-invested with Rio Tinto now to make sure that the largest refining capacity of titanium in the world outside, I would say, non-friendly nation, will be in Canada. What do you do with titanium? You do powder. With powder, you do 3D printing. With 3D printing of titanium, you replace parts of jets in theater of operation. That is essential for our security going forward. That is why when I say we have now very strategic supply chain, titanium is one, cobalt was one, semiconductor is certainly one, and that's the kind of supply chain we need to build to make sure that we are resilient within North America, to make sure that we are not dependent, overly dependent in our critical supply chain. And we've seen that because we've seen investments like in last year that Dennis, I think folks in the manufacturing sector should be very happy, because I think that the world sees what we have to offer. If you look at, for example, the number of European companies that have come to invest, you may have seen Honda, which is, as announced recently, one of its largest investment in its history. 75 years of history, 19 billion in capex in North America to make sure they'll be there. Same thing with Dow. I mean, we have countless of examples where people see that the future is certainly in North America. And when you have these anchor investments, that means there's opportunities for everyone in the room.
Well, I'm glad you started to talk about EVs, because there has been speculation and sort of interpretations of what incoming President Trump said, that he would unwind significant parts of the Biden's administration's support to build out the EV supply chain. Clearly that, is not something that we would like to see. How do we deal with that? How would we counter that, or what would it imply?
Well, people can have different views, but I think the decarbonization of the economy is going to happen one way or the other. Whether it's at the speed and the adoption rate and all that, we can discuss. But I think for me that the North Star is there in the sense that we know that it's going to happen over time and different. We have new technologies, and certainly this has been a competitive advantage, certainly for us in Canada. I don't have a crystal ball. Maybe Jay has one. I don't have one to know what a future administration might or might not do. But one thing I know is that a lot of these plants are in southern Republican states. So someone will have, I guess, to make a judgment call as to whether they want to affect that or change in a way, and that's possible. But I would say from our perspective, one thing that we should not lose sight of is that these investments have allowed us to attract record level of investments. And I would rather have the automotive sector of the future in North America. I've seen these investments, and like I said, I don't have a crystal ball, but certainly what I've seen from manufacturers and the rules of origins we have in the agreement, the fact that they're made in North America, the quality of our workforce. I remember being with the chairman of one of the largest auto manufacturers, and as a good lawyer, you ask a question, but you know the answer. At least you hope you know the answer. And I asked him, I said, sir, I said, as you're looking at where you're going to put your investment, I said, tell me which is the most performing plants in all of your plants in the world. And obviously, I had the list on mine. And I said, he said, I know where you're going. I said, here you go. The most performing plants are in North America. And if you want to be successful, I bet that you should be adding capacity in North America. And I think that, for me, we've been doing the same thing for 100 years in the car industry. We're switching probably for the next 100 years. Can you have market adaptation issues, consumer preference, supply chain issue? Yes, it's normal. We've been doing the same thing for 100 years. But I think if you look, and the challenge for us, Dennis, for all of us, sometimes is to think exponentially. Human nature is good to think on a linear basis. Very few of us in the room can imagine what the world's going to look like 30 years from now. I mean, I come from a generation, and I'll share with you about, if you want to look at the future and new technology. I happen to be with the CEO of one of the largest chips manufacturer one day. And that day's company was worth more than the Canadian economy. So some may say that he had some success in a way in doing what he did. And I remember asking him, I said, sir, I'm 54. In my lifetime, I think the most transformational thing I've seen is the internet. And very difficult when I was 12 or 15 or 20 to imagine what the internet would be. I said, why don't you compare that to AI, for example, and what AI is going to do to us? And he paused for 30 seconds. And when you're only two in the room and you're talkative like me, it's a pretty long time, 30 seconds, to look at someone in the eyes. And he looked at me and he paused and he said, Minister, I think AI is going to be 100 times more transformative. So that night I came home and I said to my wife, assuming this guy doesn't really know what he's doing, assuming that he was lucky to start a company that is worth probably now $3 trillion, I said, that would be 50 times. And then I said, assuming it's 95% wrong, assuming he's just bragging, anything, that would be 5 times more. So I said, just try to imagine, because, you can only compare to what you know. I said, imagine something 5 times more transformational than internet. It's almost difficult to fathom. So to go back to your question, I think that the decarbonization is going to happen one way or the other. Could there be a different level of adoption at different point by different industry? Perhaps. But I think for us, let's not forget that the fact that we have onshore and reshore a number of these big manufacturing facilities, whether I'm thinking what you have in Mexico, you have the number of big manufacturing, whether it's in the United States with I can think of Intel in Ohio, because Jay and I studied at university next to each other almost. And whether you're looking at Canada, what we've been able to attract in terms of manufacturing investment, I would say those are good manufacturing jobs. They're going to create great ecosystem. and we're going to be at the forefront of the economy of the 21st century.
Well, that's certainly hopeful, and I hope you're right. Now, so maybe let's move outside of North America, because you do spend a lot of your time, around the world and talking to other governments and other industries. As you meet with your counterparts, what are some of the trends you're seeing on how governments around the world are thinking of manufacturing and supporting an industrial policy, and maybe even a commentary on how it compares with us in North America and in Canada?
Well, I think it's a good thing, but I know economists could disagree with me, and that's okay. But I think what you've seen is government being more proactive. And I think I must say I have to give credit to our American friends in that, but the IRA and the CHIPS Act were really catalysts to really, bring back manufacturing and say manufacturing is great, and we need manufacturing. And I think there was a sense that maybe over decades we had let go manufacturing. And now I think that we came to the understanding that for our prosperity and I would say to make sure that we would be resilient for decades to come, we need to bring back manufacturing. So I think you saw in Canada, when we saw the IRA, for example, we had our own response. And some people would say, why did you do that? I say, listen, if I was an island in the Pacific, I probably could have my own industrial policy. But when you're part of a larger economic bloc, you need to make sure that you level the playing field. Because if the rules are the same for everyone, we tend to win. Then we have a fair competition. And that's what we did in Canada. And I think you've seen even in Europe and other places where I think that we came to realize as government, and I'm quite okay with that as a government, to have supported key industries to onshore them back, because if I look at the payback that I have today for what I have invested in terms of public money, if I was an investment banker, I would get a bonus. Because the reward and the benefits that you're going to see, not only now, but for the future and decades to come, is going to be tremendous. So for me, I think you're going to see, and I think it's a good thing, more proactive governments to make sure, for example, that you onshore manufacturing of semiconductor, that you onshore, for example, in our case, the battery ecosystem, that you onshore, for example, the manufacturing of critical or refining critical minerals, or that you make sure that, for example, in the nuclear industry, we could be a powerhouse. And I just want to say that because folks have probably not realized, but now Canada and the United States, to Cameco, Westinghouse, and Candu, we own, if you want it directly, 50% of all the nuclear installed base in the world. So talk about a growth agenda at a time where if people are talking about the AI revolution and quantum, you cannot talk about that and the digital economy without talking about energy. Right. And therefore, how can we together, for example, and I'm sure there's part of the supply chain with our Mexican friend, how can we make sure that we're going to be a powerhouse in the world? So for me, I think you'll see government proactive, and I think it's a good thing because just leaving the market for itself, I'm not sure if today we would have been successful in onshoring back, for example, semiconductors. And I don't know if anyone would want to rely today on any foreign nation. Obviously, I was trade minister, I believe in trade. But when it comes to key strategic supply chain, I think we need to put an economic security lens on it. And that's why we've invested, for example, in critical minerals, because Canada is one of the few countries which has been endowed with all the critical minerals, the 30 ones that the US have listed as critical for the future of our economy. So therefore, I think it is smart, and I think government did well to invest and co-invest to make sure that we could refine these critical minerals on our shore.
Well, thank you, and that's a very, very hopeful. One last question. It wasn't on the script, but a lot of the discussion has been around vis-a-vis China and how we deal with China and how they deal in the world. In front of a bunch of North American manufacturers, maybe some perspective on that, from your point of view as Canada.
Well, I would say the world has changed. The world has changed, and I think in the Canada has been very aligned in understanding the challenges and opportunities of this new world. And certainly you have seen, in our case in Canada, I manage the equivalent of what you call CFIUS in the United States. I manage what we call the Invest in Canada Act, which is very similar to what you have in the United States. And I think that we have taken all the steps required to protect our economic security and national security in key supply chain. And I think colleagues here in the room would be well advised to think about their entirety of their supply chain in Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. I can tell you, I was just at a speaker at the mining conference, and some executives were asking me, Minister, how do you see that? I said, when we have blocked certain transactions and certain investments to protect our national security, yes, we did that because we did a national security review. But I said, you should look very much what do you want in your supply chain, because I can tell you, when I talked to, for example, the OEM, I said you would be well advised to check with the ultimate customer of your ultimate customer what they want to see in their supply chain. Because what I hear now from global CEOs is that they're drilling down in their supply chain to make sure they're resilient, but also they want to understand that there's no vulnerability in their supply chain for now and the foreseeable future. So I think that we have echoed the concern that have been expressed with our American friends about China, and we understand these concerns, we share these concerns, and we have acted in a way that Canada would protect the integrity of the supply chain. And I would say to all our friends here from the three countries, I think that we should be mindful of that, and I think this is going to be top of mind when you're talking to a future U.S. administration, as it is with the current administration. So I think we are well aligned in understanding the concern, and I think the steps that we have been taking now are going to protect the resilience of our supply chain for decades to come.
Well, thank you for your perspective, and I've learned over the years, always give the minister the last word. So we were so happy that you've been here and spent so much time with us this morning, and to give us your perspective and really set the stage. So before we end, the last word to you, sure, Minister, and then we'll move on.
Well, thank you again. I know you're going to have a long day, so I just want to say, hope Champagne was a good start of your day this morning. I would say let's seize the moment. Let's be ambitious, and let's make sure that this amazing trading bloc that we have created together will provide prosperity and stability and opportunities for generations to come. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Canada. Merci tout le monde. Bonne journée à tout le monde.